What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Before I get started on the video, just want to let everybody know I will be live tonight at about 9 p.m. Normally it was going to be 8:30, but a couple of guys had to back it up. But going to have a couple of Giants YouTubers on. We're going to do our first live mock draft simulation on the channel. We'll do some 6-round Giant mock drafts. We'll go over some first-round mock drafts. Whatever it may be, going to try to go over various scenarios in which I think and they think the New York Giants could potentially face in this upcoming draft. So hopefully I see some of you guys there for that. But in this video, I wanted to talk about a couple of topics. No real current events with the New York Giants. It's still kind of a slow time leading up into the draft. We still have 2 weeks till it's here. But one prospect that's been starting to get at least a little bit of traction regarding the New York Giants, and that's been getting a lot of play today on Twitter, is Patrick Surtain of Alabama. I also wanted to touch on some of the things that Albert Breer had to say about Eli Manning and Julian Edelman when putting them in the same sentence together. And I'll get to that in a minute. As far as Patrick Surtain goes, if you watch my channel since week 10, I've been a guy that has been expressing that the New York Giants absolutely need to fix that cornerback spot. As a matter of fact, I said it was our biggest need on this football team until such time I saw the wide receiving core later in the season, and then I kind of shifted and said wide receiver 1, cornerback 2. So I would have been completely on board with drafting Patrick Surtain. The other thing I want to say, and I think Art Stapleton, who I think is a great writer for the New York Giants, brought up some of these points, and I think some of what he said is valid. When he talked about Patrick Surtain, he went on to say that he feels it's more so for the future, not so necessarily just for this year. But this is what he had to say about the drafting of Patrick Surtain. The highest floor, highest ceiling prospect for the Giants at 11, to be honest. And quite frankly, the safest pick, if he's there, is Patrick Surtain. Now, what is some of the reasoning why he thinks he's the safest pick? Well, many regard him as a very good cornerback prospect. He's also not a guy that's going to carry any baggage. He's a guy that has ties to Judge. He played at Alabama. He's got ties to Xavier McKinney. He would probably fit in this defense very nicely. And he's regarded as a top 10 talent in this year's draft class. So I get the safe part of it, unless a guy, somebody unforeseen drops like Jamar Chase or, Penei Sewell or maybe Rashawn Slater. But outside of that, I could understand it. It's why I brought him up in my last video when I was talking about the BPA. Because one thing I constantly hear from people that want to take the wide receiver is you have to go BPA. And I talked about this exact scenario. What if Patrick Surtain was there? Would you still draft the best available player? And I think most Giant fans would scoff at that. And even though I am a huge proponent of the cornerback position, especially in this defense, after the New York Giants signed Adoree Jackson, we now have $13 million a year tied up into that position. On that side, we're also paying James Bradberry, I think, $17 and $18 million each year over the next 2 years. Now, granted, we don't know if James Bradberry is going to be the long-term answer. We don't know if he's going to regress. We don't know if we'll extend him. We've also tied up money into Logan Ryan. We're paying him $10 million a year over the next 3 years. Just between those three players, you're talking like, what, $35 to $40 million? Tying up, I don't know, almost, 25% of your cap between those three players. You also have Jabril Peppers making $7 million a year on the 5th-year rookie extension this year. And you may have to give him an extension in the very near future if you feel like he's going to be a part of the future of this football team. And maybe I'm a guy that thinks too much about need. Maybe you disagree with me. But unless he is a Deion Sanders-like talent, if you feel like he's going to be that type of corner, you can't pass him up, I get it. But if he's just a very good corner prospect, even a great corner prospect, I do not think it would be in the best interest of the New York Giants to draft him. The other thing I'll say, a lot of times it takes time for corners to develop. And on this team, he wouldn't be able to develop this year. You're not going to play him on the outside with Adoree Jackson and, of course, James Bradberry. If anything, maybe you play him in the slot, but that's not what he's really designed to do. He's 6'2". You also drafted Darnay Holmes in the 4th round last year, who a lot of New York Giants think has a lot of upside in that spot, along with guys like Julian Love, so on and so forth. The Giants have spent a lot of money in free agency and the draft on that position in recent years, and I fully recognize it may be the most important positional group on this defense. I think that is what's going to allow the New York Giants to blitz, and had we not signed Adoree Jackson, I would have been completely on board with it. But when you look at the position groups on this team, the secondary as a whole, to me, is far and away the strongest positional group on this team right now. Maybe you could argue defensive line if they could fix, the void left by Dalvin Tomlinson, which was probably the strongest unit on this team last year. But I think those two units, the secondary and the defensive line, are far and away our strongest units on this team right now. And I fully recognize, like Art said, that you don't just draft for this year. I get that. But for a team that you need to find out what Daniel Jones is going forward, and we need to know that this year, I think you have to do everything in your power to help this kid. Now, if you're in love with a player on the defensive end, whether it be an edge rusher, whether it be a linebacker, and you feel like that will help the team the most this year, a really good defense could help out Jones as well. But a guy like Surtain is not going to help the Giants in 2021 unless we have injuries or you're going to play him at the slot. And like I said, unless he's a Jeff Okudah level prospect, who was thought to be one of the best corners coming out in the last 5 or 6 years, which is not the case here. Many people thought Caleb Farley was better before the injury news came out. Some people think J.C. Horn is better. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for the New York Giants at all. You use free agency to set yourself up for the draft. The New York Giants spent $13 million a year on a 3-year contract on Adoree Jackson. If they were to do that, it would make you think they're not going to be drafting a corner in the first round. Now, I am completely on board with taking a corner in the 3rd, the 4th round. I brought up guys like Paulson Adebo, but to take one in the 1st when he is not far and away the best prospect at that pick, which he wouldn't be. There's at least guys that are close to him that could potentially be there at 11. I think the New York Giants would be making a mistake if they were to take him there. That's just my honest opinion. I will trust the Giants and their coaching staff with whatever they do in this draft, but that would certainly not be my ideal draft choice. The other thing I wanted to touch on were some of the things that came out from Albert Breer. And Breer, to no surprise, is a New England writer, New England fan, and basically what he did was he compared Eli Manning and Julian Edelman and saying why both of them should absolutely not make the Hall of Fame, which I don't understand why Eli Manning constantly gets brought up in these conversations about the Hall of Fame. He's like a lightning rod, and people hate the guy. I don't get it. I guess it's because he was a New York Giant, and I say it all the time. If he played for almost any other team, anywhere else in the world, 2-time Super Bowl MVP, with 2 of the greatest drives in the history of the NFL, and some of the things that he did, and I'll get more into it in this video, it wouldn't even be a discussion about whether or not he was going to make the Hall of Fame. And that's my honest opinion on that. There's been several quarterbacks. Kurt Warner's one of them. Nobody cried when he made the Hall of Fame. There's several others I could go over the course of history that have gotten in that have less credentials than what Eli Manning has, but for some reason he's a lightning rod, and I don't even understand why Breer brought him up in the discussion with Edelman. But to compare Julian Edelman and Eli Manning in terms of being equals of making the Hall of Fame is a joke. But these are some of the things that he had to say. Both guys, to me, wouldn't sniff the Hall of Fame based on regular season production. And I'm not sure there was a point in either's career when you could say that guy is top 5 at his position. And on balance, I believe that most cases that being elite at your position for an extended period more than just a point in time is the prerequisite for getting in. And I don't need to go down the laundry list of players that do not meet those qualifications at the quarterback position that have gotten in, but there are plenty, 6, 7 names come to mind off the top of my head that have gotten in at that quarterback spot that were not at the top of their game throughout the entirety of their career. The common things I hear about Eli Manning, the 2 things that people bash him for are the interceptions. He led the league in picks 3 times, as did Brett Favre. Warren Moon led the league in picks twice, and the 500 record. He has a career 500 record, I think, at 118 and 118. Warren Moon has a below 500 record for his career. Led the league in interceptions twice. Not that I'm comparing the two. Warren Moon's a 9-time Pro Bowler, an unbelievable quarterback, but he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. And the 2 things I hear about Eli Manning, I never heard that about Warren Moon. He's got a below 500 record. Eli Manning has 2 Super Bowls. Warren Moon's 2 and 5. And this is not to bash Warren Moon. I'm just saying that I think Eli Manning gets a lot more hate than he deserves when it comes to the Hall of Fame credentials. At the end of the day, if you want to point to his regular season accomplishments, the guy's top 10 in yards and touchdowns. He also, in 2011, was absolutely one of the top 5 quarterbacks on the planet. There's no denying it from the start of the season until the end. And you can make arguments in other years as well, but for that year, he was probably one of the top 2 or 3. He still to this day holds the record for the most yards ever thrown in a single playoff in 2011, which he nearly eclipsed 1,200 yards in the 4 games that he participated in. And his money when it comes to the playoffs. So I think it's an absolute joke that he compares these 2 players. Next thing he went on to say, does that outweigh never having been better than, say, the 7th or 8th best player at their respective positions? Again, I disagree. I think he has been. And if by the way, 2015, Eli Manning was second in the league in touchdown passes. And if it doesn't, and stats are applied to fight the case, what about fellow big stage stars like Joe Namath and Lynn Swann? Full disclosure, I tend to put weight on big stage performances and that sort of toughness, but both mental and physical that Manning and Edelman showed. For me, it goes back to the purpose of playing those games for a player, which is to help your team win the game and ultimately win championships. But I still don't think I'd enshrine either in Canton, in part because I think it should be hard to get in. Well, Edelman shouldn't even be in the conversation for Canton. Julian Edelman has 7,000. I don't even think he has over 7,000 career receiving yards. He only had 3 1,000-yard seasons. He's never eclipsed over, I think, 1,150 yards in a season, and he only has 36 career touchdown catches. Yeah, he has some good postseason moments because he went there every year. But let's face it, without Tom Brady, Julian Edelman may not have even hung around in the NFL. Not to mention he got popped for steroids. Eli Manning was the epitome of class. He won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. He was second all-time in consecutive starts. He was as clutch as nails, and he did it on the biggest stage at the most important position. To put Eli Manning and Julian Edelman in the same sentence regarding their Hall of Fame credentials is a joke, and it's just another example of the outside media trying to pick on New York athletes, specifically Mr. Eli Manning, who will absolutely be in Canton. I can't wait to see all the tears come out from all the haters, but he'll be in there one way or another. Might not be on the first ballot, might be the second, maybe the third, might be the fourth, but I know when he does get there, I'll be there to celebrate. As far as Surtain goes, I think he's a really good prospect. I would have been completely on board with drafting him had we not signed Adoree Jackson. I think the signing of Adoree Jackson, for me, takes that away as a possibility for the New York Giants, but we're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.